in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What was behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Indeed. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Case Closed, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday. Weekly, the place to be where you get the highest level conversation on the most relevant topics in our times, ladies and gentlemen. And today we have an all-star panel, as per usual, as they like to say, okay? Shout out to LAR, Dr. Thunder, Kaizoran Empire. We got Lion Legal so far. And as the topic says, as you read that topic, as you come in, clicking that like button and sharing the stream, we're talking about woke Disney. Woke Disney and broke Americans and toxic Republicans. And how do all these things come together? What does it mean, ladies and gentlemen? But let's go ahead and do a quick mic check there. Kaizoran Empire, Kaizo, whatever you are.
Yo, what's good?
How's it going? It's good.
Yeah,
It's good. Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good.
Yeah, not too bad. Still kicking.
Still kicking, still recovering. It's my belief you have some kind of virus.
Yeah, some kind of some evil spirit finally got a hold of me for being irreverent.
The Muslim virus got you. Now you got to go back to the Christian.
Yep, we're gonna go back to Jesus.
Yeah, you were the leper. You were the leper that didn't return. Unfortunately. Well, anyways, how's it going, LAR?
It's great. Let's get it going.
Let's get it going. You're out there in hot ass Texas, but don't worry. The summer is receding. We're coming towards the end. We're going to be approaching fall soon, ladies and gentlemen. Lion Legal, how's it going, sir? How are you?
Good, thank you. How's my audio?
Audio is not bad. Everyone's audio is spick and span so far. Let's see, Dr. Thunder, out there on the road in the car. How's your mic these days?
Everything's going all right.
Excellent. Okay, cool. So we're gonna approach this topic from many different angles, but let's start with the theme of this show, right? We talk about highest level conversations on the most relevant topic. The highest level that you can take this thing to is a place we're not necessarily going to go, okay? We're not necessarily going to get to the philosophical and mythical aspects of this. We're going to take a couple of steps down maybe to the political and economic and maybe some social aspects. What are we talking about, okay? We're essentially talking about populism. You see, populism is anti-woke. Populism says, hey, you are trying to control me. But let's just take a step back. Populism says the elites have failed us. Populism, generally speaking, is a counter-elite thing. It says, hey, the elites sent us to forever wars in the Middle East. The elites messed up the whole pandemic. They told us all kinds of lies, and they're hiding the lies now, okay? The elites messed up the whole lockdown program. They're incompetent. Shout out to LAR, right? And we are dissatisfied. And also we are broke. Our wages are not going up. And the elites keep preaching to us this woke stuff. And it begs the question as to what exactly is the correlation between these things. So I'm going to start out by asking this basic yes or no question to kind of see where our heads are. Okay. Let me start with Kaizo, if you're there, sir. If I were to say, okay, that wokeness is a way to pacify the populace, okay, wokeness is a way to keep you kind of either happy or a way of calling you some kind of a bad name if you're not happy, okay. And this is all because I'm trying to distract you from the fact that you are broke, that there's an economic aspect to woke capitalism. There's a reason why Disney is going around giving platitudes about social concern, about being aware of all the social stuff, about going woke, about the new Snow White needing to be empowered and all those other kinds of things. But in reality, the economic situation is not improving for the populace. So if I were to say this, Kaiser, wokeness is a way to pacify the populace, that there is a correlation between Americans being broke for the longest time, and we'll get into this chart, which I'm showing here. There is a correlation between you being broke and an increase in the corporate overlords who are supposed to be giving you money, rather telling you that you are included and that they feel your pain, but you're still broke. Is this a fitting? What do you think about this theory, Kaizo? And then we'll go to Lion Legal and go the way up there. Is there an economic component to woke capitalism in this regard? Or what do you think is going on here?
Yeah, of course. And it's a way to pacify you and prepare you for the next steps that they're going to have. Because if you look at this chart, you look at the lowest earners, right? The bottom quartiles, both the bottom 5% and the quartile. You can see that clearly across time since the 20s, their pay hasn't increased, right? This is all take into account inflation. Their pay hasn't increased at all. The more or less people who are in the bottom caste of society in economic term are wherever they are, right? And if you look at the top quartile and of course the 5%, you can clearly see that those people have benefited from the time changes. So yes, I do think wokeness is definitely something to pacify the lack of economic. What's that word where you can kind of move between the stratums?
Oh yeah, you can pick a word. You can say advancement if you want.
Yeah, economic advancement. Yeah.
All that good stuff. All right, all right, all right. Since you've pointed to the chart, let me go ahead and say what can be clearly read on the chart. And for those who are listening, basically, we're showing a chart here of real wages. Real means that it's taking into account some changes in the landscape, and the changes will be inflation, right? So forget inflation, right? Real wages are flat, meaning that even if you get a yearly increase of 3%, inflation is 3%. And you can see that the bottom earners, the bottom half, have been basically flat for over 30 years, over 40 years, right? And the people on the top have been, kind of doing pretty well. They've been doubling their wages in real terms. Forget inflation, right? They're popping. Okay, it's on and popping over there. However, in the lower strata, we do not see the same thing. Now, populism is rising as we see with Brexit, with MAGA in Hungary and all these other places. People are moving towards more of a populist, nationalistic, even ethnic type of sentiment. And I'm saying that a big part of it has to do with these charts that you're seeing here. But anyways, just initial sentiments with regards to what's on the table so far, Mr. Lion Legal, and what's on the table is saying that, hey, is this wokeness a way of pacifying the people that you see in the lower lines here? A way of saying, hey, we corporate people, and we're talking about corporate wokeness now, not just the ideology itself, the fact that it is within the halls of corporate America. That corporate America is telling you that you belong and you should feel great because really you're broke. What are your thoughts about that, Lion Legal?
I think the whole idea about wokeness has been completely changed from its original inception, which was created by essentially a group of Black people in order to address a lot of injustice. Now it has been completely taken over by everybody that feels that they have a complaint against any right wing issue. Why is it used so widely these days? I'm not sure if it is used specifically to pacify people. However, it is a form of virtue signaling. So if you try to pretend that you're a good person because you adhere to a particular ideology, whereas that does not say anything about how economically successful you are, how hard you've worked to achieve anything in your own life. And wokeness is so broad that calling yourself woke, uh, in my view, does not simply make you a good person, because there are, a lot of ideologies there that are essentially, um, let's just say, anti-family. Let's just say anti-family. So I'm not sure that it is a scheme to defraud or disenfranchise people, but it has been used as such. And the same people that use it as virtue signaling have forced corporations to adopt woke ideology, which does not help the bottom line. The last thing I'll say on this is that I'm actually reading a book on finance and about how to value companies. And the most commonly used method of valuation is discounted cash flow. Maybe not the most commonly used, but let's say one of the most respected. How does wokeism help companies to have free cash flow, yield, profit, greater revenue? It doesn't.
Exactly. So I like the point that you bring up. Well, first of all, by way of summarizing, you're saying, look, you don't think that it's a priori scheme. However, this is a thing that can be used for virtue signaling. And as such, it has been adopted as a way of, putting some sheen on my armor here. Like, hey, I'm a good person. I'm a good corporate citizen. I'm doing all the right ESG types of things. I'm saying all the right types of stuff. I'm giving my employees all kinds of days. Rainbow Day, let's get busy together day, whatever kinds of days, and Black Month, whatever it is. However, as we see in this chart, they are actually not getting better off. And also, there is a flip side to that in the sense that not only could it pacify some people, it can also be a way to shame the people who may be complaining. In other words, if you're one of these populists, right, anti-woke, that starts talking about, hey, let's close the borders, or hey, globalization has hurt me. Okay, because the fact that you see these numbers low, we can talk about three words, or maybe at least just two. We can talk about automation and globalization. This is the reason why, okay, those numbers in the bottom are low, and also the reason why the numbers on the top are high. In other words, if you are Apple and you take your capital to a place where you have more leverage over labor, yes, your profits are going to shoot up, and the wages of the people in your local area are going to stay down, right? So automation and globalization is not in your favor as this populist person. But if you are anti-global, then, oh, you're just anti-cultural, mixing, and you're xenophobe, and, you're just a backwards type of person. What's wrong with you? So it's very useful in that regard. And the last point that you made there, I like it. The company making the most profits right now out there in the NASDAQ or whatever is NVIDIA. Somebody might have heard of it. Okay. They're making the chips, all this big stuff about the artificial intelligence is going to happen. Someone has to make those chips. It's NVIDIA. And nobody knows anything about what NVIDIA does woke-wise. NVIDIA's got the money. They got the goods. So they don't have to be woke. So I'm still making my point, which is not a real point. It's just a question. And to you, Dr. Thunder, the question continues. Woke, okay, which was initially it's an African American word, right? Before it became this kind of this kind of political thing, it was woke. Are you woke? Your eyes open? Are you seeing the thing? Are you conscious, right? And it was maybe applied to maybe some racial aspects, such as being able to see the racial inequities and such. And then it got adopted. But what are your thoughts about it being a way to pacify and shame people?
Yeah, a few points I have here. So the first point that I think is interesting is the globalism and the people trying to shame folks for suggesting that we should prioritize taxpayers over folks that are not here, getting, that being seen as being xenophobic or something. That thing is interesting because they seem to lose all of that global, you know, that positivity of globalism. They lose all of that when you start talking about getting your passport. Right now, it's like, now you're trying to take advantage of folks that are other places and everything else. And of course, the globalists have been taking advantage of people all these years, all this time. You look at these in India, you look at the what am I talking about? These lithium mines, right? And of course, there's rules about how many people are supposed to be in the lithium mine. And they take pictures, and the picture has like nobody in there. But what they're actually doing is people all crowded in there. By any other standard, it would be some kind of health. Some kind of health. What am I saying? Some issue with not prioritize people's health. It's a humanitarian crisis. Look, we're making these people do X, Y, and Z. They don't care about that though. So the global thing, that's only a talk. That's a talking point for a limited, for limited folks. Limited folks get to use that. Other folks, they get their passport and they say, "Hey, I found a better situation over here," or it could be for a dating situation. Could be because you want to, work remotely with your, from the beach. Beachfront properties less expensive, but there's a lot of shame going for those folks. But so that's one thing I think is interesting about this. Another thing, second point, is about this woke terminology. Yes, it definitely came from the Black struggle, and woke as being sort of an expression talking about Black consciousness, and Black not being, we're not talking about people that are melanated, that are immigrants. We're talking about folks that, FBA, ADOS folks. So there was a priority on focusing on that community and being awake and aware of what's going on with respect to that community. And of course, it's been expanded to be used for all kinds of stuff. And I love the arguments when they try to say that the rainbow experience is the same as the Black experience and all this kind of stuff. I love when they try to do that, but they have taken a word out of its natural habitat, spread it around, and then here's the thing that's interesting, because I spent a lot of time, and this is something that Green Gorilla said on his platform yesterday. A lot of us spend a lot of time criticizing a lot of the stuff on the left, a lot of the rainbow stuff, a lot of the, quote unquote, the social reengineering, the trans stuff, attempting to indoctrinate your kids with X, Y, and Z, all of that kind of stuff. That's all stuff that seems to be coming out of the left. So we spend a lot of time criticizing that, but we must not be naive to the fact that when there's a criticism of woke stuff, they're not just pushing back against rainbow. They pushing back against you too, Negro. Right? Because all of that stuff has been seemingly conflated, and though especially Black men are not receiving any benefit from this, from the intersectional stuff, right? We're not receiving any benefit. We're directly in the crosshairs when they start pushing back against the quote unquote woke agendas and like this, right? And so when you hear, you see some of these songs that came out that, popularized now, where, you got a country song talking about, F this person, F that person, and F Disney and F all this like that. Yeah, on the surface, you're thinking, yeah, this sounds good. But you have to understand that because of all the caucusing that black folks have done with the rainbow, they pushing back against you too. And all they had to do, and this is also interesting because the people that are most responsible for this overreach of this woke stuff are white women. Okay, it's in particular, it's the liberal elite white women. They are, and academics in particular, they are most responsible for this proliferation of this woke stuff. And so it is all they had to do, and I'm sort of repeating a sentiment that Green Gorilla made yesterday on his show. All they had to do is just treat black men with respect. But because they refused to treat black men with respect, they tried this end around approach. Right? And then the end around becomes actually a benefit for them. Right? And this treating as women as if they are something, as if they can exist outside of what their race is a total, it's total hogwash. It's a smokescreen. It's a smokescreen. And the early black activists, those that were actually woke, they understood this. Sexism replaced racism, right? It became these women's studies courses at these colleges and universities. They were to replace the black studies programs. See, so this stuff is done very deliberately, and then they sit back and pretend like they don't know where this came from or why is this way, and then even have the audacity, to point a finger at you. So, yeah.
So when doing your populist dance and rallying with people that are anti-woke, if you will, you must realize that you're cooning in a certain aspect, because the pushback is also a pushback against any social justice for your group as well. Now, the whole funny thing to me is the fact that believe that from a causal perspective, that the economic picture really is what is going on. And therefore, there's always a risk of things blowing up or conflagration, because there is no solution other than to put the money in those people's pockets that we saw was flat, right? And then they wouldn't know about the jobs that went to China, and then start looking inwards to find the enemy and blah, blah, blah. So yes, it is an interesting thing. And what you point out does stifle or hinder the ability for black men to increase pieces of their reach to the pie by pushing against woke. But anyways, yes. So Mr. LAR, okay? Proposition on the table is that wokeness is just a way to pacify people because of the chart that I showed. The chart that I showed that real wages, more or less for the bottom 95% of people, has remained kind of just constant. Like if 1960 broke is still today's broke, their paycheck is not increased, right? So what do you think about that? Is there an economic aspect to the reason why these corporations preach this stuff? Is it just convenient, as Mr. Lion Legal said? It just so happens to be convenient for everybody to use it to virtue signal and make themselves look good. But go ahead.
Politics is what businesses and corporations are using to run off with all the money while people are arguing about stupid stuff. Being woke at this particular point is just synonymous with being stupid and doing things that don't make sense for the masses of society. That's what it's basically turned into. The interesting thing about it is the people who on the other side of woke, they're just as stupid. It's just they're unwoke stupid, or they're patriotic stupid, So it's kind of one of those things where, even like what you said about the inflation, the difference, I guess, now from from then to now is the price of everything. The price of things in the 60s is not the price in 2023. And the interesting thing about that, when I using like the woke synopsis, is to me, especially with entertainment or anything dealing with media, basically people are trying to push woke because they're doing bad business, and they're hoping that it makes people look so bad that we can do something completely different. But at the same time, nobody's buying anything. You once you put a stranglehold on the economy, you're basically throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. So just woke is just another aspect of, let me see if I can throw this against the wall. Because here's the interesting thing, and I'm using entertainment as a reference. Woke was profitable maybe 4 years ago, and what I mean is, woke became profitable in America when the Black Panther hit $1 billion, and then Aquaman hit $1 billion. That wasn't supposed to happen. So, and now you look at it like, okay, so we're trying to get money out of people. We're trying to, then people invested in Black Lives Matter, which was supposed to be woke, but that was, and people knew it up front. It was an LGBT. How did Kaiser say it? Let's get to whatever it is.
Let's get busy together.
Yeah, let's get busy together movement. So now you're looking at a society where, and people fall for it every political cycle. I'm on this side, so I think this way. They're on that side, so they think that way. And both of you are halfway right and halfway wrong, which means nothing's going to get accomplished. So, and the corporations are like, man, their salaries keep going up. And nobody asks the questions, what are they doing to have their salaries keep going up? Maybe, just maybe, they're keeping the public at bay by being dumb. They're getting paid to make sure we're arguing about dumb stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody could. The biggest, one of the most profitable businesses in America was Amazon, right? So the interesting thing about it is, everybody in America needs all this stuff, but nobody's getting better at anything. So what do we need this stuff for? To pacify ourselves, to do absolutely nothing. So to me, it's just capitalizing off of dumb agendas. Like that's what I think.
Word 'em up. Word 'em up indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Case Closed. As you come in, please go ahead and click that like button. Now, okay, let's say we were to just put on our humanity hat here. We don't think too much. We don't have to get into, well, why should we care about this chart, right? Let's just say that, there's that basic thing that, we have to kind of care about the plight of people, okay? And for basic humanity reasons. And hence people are going to have political solutions, political/economic solutions to what this chart shows. We perceive the problem here to be one of increasing inequality, right? And we see that as a social problem. Kaizo, and then we'll go back around. Do you want to flatten this curve? Do you want to push down the people over there, that dotted line, the black dotted line, the people going to the moon? Do you want to flatten them via some redistributive policy, tax them, give money to the people below? Or do you think there's a means of raising the bottom up? What are your thoughts regarding fixing the lives or fixing this particular issue? Inequality is not perceived well, and all kinds of problems come with it. But anyways, go ahead.
Okay, so unless there is a pressure, inequality is the norm anywhere, right? In any system, you'll never get equality, right? because that's just the nature of things. Um, Now, if you're going to put pressure on it, it'll be a government top-down approach. You could make the argument that capitalism is overrated for its egalitarian principles. Capitalism is actually preferring those who are intellectually more capable, those who have no mental health issues, etc. I can go on and make the list of the kinds of people that capitalism allows to thrive, not survive, but thrive in their system. So one could argue, listen, this is expected. If you look at any country with as much so-called freedoms as America, you'd see a very similar, if not worse, curve than that. The only countries that you might see more, equality would be, Scandinavian countries, and the reason for that is heavy taxes on the rich, money gets redistributed for um, social services, etc., free healthcare, all of that good stuff. So ultimately, I would say capitalism itself has to be questioned. Perhaps we just need to get rid of the system altogether and create a new system, right, based on universal basic income and hey, print loads of money and redistribute that money to the poor.
Okay, so modern monetary theory esque solutions with universal basic income and lots of printing to go with it. And then you flatten the curve that way, you lift some people up, things become relatively kind of maybe more Scandinavianized, if you will. But, anyways, Lion Legal, okay, this chart is a problem, okay? And we see the outgrowths of this problem in populism. What is your solution to this problem, Mr. Lion Legal? In broad strokes, obviously.
Definitely, I will respond to that question. I would also like to respond to something that was said before, which is that if anybody is anti uh, or suppose the anti woke agenda that is also going after black people, I wholeheartedly reject that. And this is one of the issues I think that we have in the black community is that we tie our issues to everybody else, to every single person on planet Earth.
Lion Legal,
Yeah.
let me pause you there for a second. Um, just to clarify, I think the point was an empirical point, saying that the tying has already been done because of the caucusing. In other words, people within certain parties have already tied their destiny to a particular coalition, right? So you get the point. So it's like if you tie yourself with the Let's Get Busy Together coalition and the rest, right? And you're in there, right? Then any pushback against the Let's Get Busy Together coalition is a pushback against you as well. So the tie-in has been done a priori, and I believe it was an observation in that sense. But I just want to add that I guess later on, Dr.
Yeah, sure,
Thunderbolt.
sure.
But go ahead.
Sure. I don't think I'm not exactly sure that black interests are actually tied tied to that, although it seems like they are. But in actual fact, if you look at a lot of what the black community wants, needs, etc. I mean, of course, there are some things as far as would affirmative action, if it was still in place, have help the black community in the short term. It appears that it would have. So I will say that that as part of the woke agenda, certainly I can see the correlation between the two. But in general, I think that the um, the traditional issues or structure of the black family is so unique that it is not tied into the work agenda. And I can tell that you don't want me to harp on this point, so I'm just going to move on. As far as
Can
actually,
I can I can I
uh, uh,
explain something
as
just to be
far
sure?
as like
Um,
increasing the
in a
economic
second, Leon.
state of people, uh, that I think is also completely separate from the work agenda, as the graph that you presented actually shows, because it shows that even with the um, the um, woke ideology that has proliferated, it has not affected people that are impoverished and not doing well financially. What does affect it is depending on the different government policies that can be put in place, and it has to be government policy, unfortunately. It cannot simply be free market capitalism, because there are some people that will never be able to get on the ladder. So there are several different ways of doing so. Number one, depending on what employment contract they have, if it's a contract that allows you to get fired because the company just would like to cut back, etc., then of course you will get a lot of people that are on stable jobs and are not doing well. In addition to that, what is the like the minimum wage that applies in that particular jurisdiction? That also affects things. Also, does the government want to build factories, want to ensure that they are interested in a particular type of technology? I will give you an example. The UK, I read in the Wall Street Journal that the UK wanted to invite people to build electronic batteries, which are very expensive and need government subsidies because of how expensive they are. They couldn't give as much subsidies as the US and Saudi could. So therefore, the companies that were originally going to build them in the UK left. They went to Saudi Arabia, and they also went to the States. So government policy actually affects what type of industry is going to exist in your country, and if people decide to build there. If they build, that also factors into the pay that people will get, the employment rate, things of that sort. So you have to have very good government policies to counteract this. Wokeism is not going to affect how much you get paid in the long run without laws changing and government policy being put in place.
Very good, very, very good, sir. Eliar, real quick, I believe you wanted to make a quick explanation, a step back, right?
Yeah. Generally speaking, in America, and I can only leave out maybe Native Americans, which is sometime in the Jewish community. When a group feels slighted in America, in general, they decide that the only way to make it look serious is to say, well, I'm getting treated like I'm Black. That's what some of these quote unquote coalitions aren't necessarily us reaching out. It's the minute somebody feels unfair, I'm getting treated like that. So in a general sense, that's what groups have done and continuously do. So some of these alliances aren't really alliances. They're just like, oh, I don't like being treated unfairly in America. It's like being Black. You need to, and then when they get what they want, they go back to their corner. So that's what that is.
I mean, I've heard this many times, but just the way you said it right now, just kind of, it was almost like shorthand for like, I can almost see like a comedy skit where you just pull out the "it's like being Black" card. It's like, it's like, oh, that thing was, just it's like being Black. Oh, I get it.
Hey, can I if I can jump in right here real quick, and then I'm gonna have to split because I've got something else going on I got to get to. Hopefully I'll be able to come back on after that. So I just wanted to jump in here. The Black card thing, the race card, So what is so kind of diabolical about this? This whole sort of bait and switch that's going on. This, let's call everybody woke, and then we can get basically the benefit of a sort of remorse that the country has for doing a specific thing and continued things to that particular population. To take the remorse that should be applied to that, evidenced by money, showing the money, use that as a way to get all of your own stuff through, with no actual concern evidenced by their behavior afterwards. Chappelle, his question, can a gay person be racist? It highlights the issue that is there, right? It highlights what the actual issue is. There's nothing that I can do not to look like, a 6'2" black man. I don't. There's nothing that I can do. That is immutable. That's what it is. However, all of this behavior stuff rising to the top of the list, which is trivial in nature, using the so-called "it's like I'm black" card, and then discarding that card when it's not necessary anymore. Something my dad used to say all the time when I was, I got old enough to start asking him questions about stuff that was going on at his job and stuff. And he was a high-ranking bureaucrat in state government and up in Michigan. And so there were different regimes that came in. Sometimes it was Democrats, sometimes it was Republicans. And usually his kind of position would have been, he would have got fired. They would have brought somebody else in at that position, at that level. But since he was so good at his job and he had his hands in so many things, he was kind of one of these sort of kind of like the, what do you call it? The deep state, as it were. He's like one of these figures that does not change, right? And the expertise is there. And one thing that he used to always say is he couldn't stand when, in particular, right-leaning folks would say, all you guys want to do is use the race card. There you are, using the race card again, using the race card. Well, here's the thing. If the race card is the only card in the deck, and you gave me the deck, all there was in the deck was race cards. What card exactly am I supposed to use? Which card am I supposed to use? And this has gotten so bad now to where now, not only do they not want you to use the race card, they're allowing other people to use your race card. And I'll pause there. Hopefully I'll be able to come back. I'll still be listening though.
Damn.
What up. Very, very well put there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you come in, go ahead and click that like button. We are on another episode of Case Closed, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday. Okay. And we had gone over the idea of woke capitalism, corporate wokeness being a way to pacify the people and also maybe shame the people, at least being a convenient way to virtue signal while the people are broke. We have a chart in front of you showing that real wages have been flat, okay, for the people on the bottom, while the people on the top, that dotted line right there, is approaching escape velocity, okay? Now, a couple of things about this chart is that, like Kaizo pointed out, it is an artifact or a consequence of a certain type of freedom, winner-take-all, innovation type stuff. And you're going to see this type of thing tend to happen. And then you add into that automation and globalization, whereby the benefit doesn't have to go down to the people in your locality. The benefit that is actually giving you these obscene profits, to use the term, are coming from the fact that you've taken these jobs overseas, right? So this is part of how you get to have a big GDP, okay, and do those types of things that you do, along with printing money in the central bank and all those other types of stuff. But LAR, the question still is on the table that, hey, if we just put on our moral hat and say, hey, we know that our cousin making 32 grand a year or whatever, I don't know, right? And it's been flat since whatever, or we used to be there, or whatever it may be. Let's say we're concerned. What do you think? Is this an issue, or is it really not an issue? This chart that you see. What are your thoughts, Eliar?
The chart is definitely an issue, but but as you can see, almost every group from one group to the next kind of doubles the other's income. The issue is really, I would say, from at the top two, maybe three. As far as production, they're the most incompetent group. I think that's the biggest issue. You know, people talk about America and what made America great back in the day. It was manufacturing. It was, America, the World War, I think two, in America, and all countries bombed each other into oblivion. America was left standing. So everybody had a job because we were manufacturing everything that the world needs. So what made America great was its production. And once you leave that industrial age to, let's just say, the information age, technological age, whatever you want to call it, what died out was production. We took out it, what corporations took out of this country was production. So the people at the top have been paid because they outsourced everything, but really they don't do anything. So unfortunately, what I'm about to say is kind of sucks, but to me, it's the reality where the upper percentile of America aren't necessarily the smartest people. Because if they were, they could keep these businesses rolling, but they're not. But more businesses are like on a precipice of failing than ever. So what it tells me is, oh, you didn't outsource to the point where you can only pay yourself. And you're only trying to pay yourself. So we're gonna have a problem. So at the end of the day, I mean, if the top 10 percentile of America was so doggone good and so smart and so grandiose, however you want to say it, then how come in the last 20 something years they're not able to fix an economic problem?
Can I chime in there a little bit?
Yes, sure. You can definitely chime in, and then we have a new panelist joining as well. But go ahead there, respond with your modern monetary theory or whatever the hell you're gonna say.
Yeah, so I agree with what Elias said in principle, but if you look at the reality is this: Americans are not productive because Americans are lazy. Americans can't keep up with the world economic arbitrage, right? If you go right now to Taiwan and look at the semiconducting company there, that TSMC, America is now trying to rebuild it more or less in Arizona State because of the war, the economic war with China, etc. And they feel like China wants to invade, Taiwan, etc. So America says, you know what, we invested too much into the East. Let's take back things slowly and let's industrialize again, right? Let's get in the game of semiconductors. Now, the issue with that is, first of all, they can't even find enough skilled Americans to work in that new factory, right? To work in a fab, one of these fabrication labs, you really need a lot of discipline, which Americans don't have. You need to feel like you're working towards a greater goal, which Americans don't have. And I say this because of the wokeism, the idea of work-life balance, wanting to be happy while working and not sort of working towards a greater goal of just success. So I guess my point is, it's very unlikely that America will ever industrialize again because it's cheaper to, even Tesla is going to China again, right? For its battery labs, etc. It's just much easier to set shop in third world countries where you pay people peanuts. Those people are so glad for a job and they'll work their, brains off, rather than setting shop in America with so much, rules and laws, worker compensation rights and all that stuff. And even forget about that, just the workers. Robots are more of a better incentive in general in America than human labor, especially in factories, because if something bad happens to a robot, you just incur the cost of repair. If something happens to someone's arms, you pay them for the rest of whatever the court decides. So I guess the issue is that America, earned a lot of money that came back into the market and in circulation, but that also kind of made America unable to kind of go backwards and industrialize. Because at the end of the day, who's going to buy these products? Go ahead.
And it's not an argument or whatever, but I've noticed this over the years. And I think sometimes when people are looking at America from the outside, they have some good points. Some of us, we make good points within America. But I think one thing that people outside of America miss is America is a land of extremes. So if the extreme is that we're lazy, you might want to look at the opposite end of that extreme because it also exists here and it's very prevalent. So I'm just saying, don't be. When you think about them,
where's the balance though? Sorry to interject, but where is the balance? Because
there is no balance.
So no, those two polar extremes exist in every society. But what's the average person?
I know
because,
that.
Yeah.
Well,
so what's the balance of America? Is it? Yeah.
My point is this. In this country, when people come look at this country, what they skip is the people who are on the other side of that spectrum. And they wind up getting their hat handed to them because that doesn't register to them until it's too late.
May I make a point here, LAR? What I want to, the point, and I was going to make it earlier, and it's in your side of things. Like this chart, okay? And maybe I'll do a little back and forth with you, LAR. Have you moved from line to line in this chart? Or have you just, whatever line or wherever, you don't have to say where you are, right? But wherever you're at, is that where you've been your whole life?
No.
Okay.
I've moved.
The thing about America, and I don't have to kind of, preach in order to make this, it's a truism, if you will, right? America has the most dynamism in terms of people being able to go up and down this chart. This is part of what you're saying too, right?
Yeah.
Right? That land of extremes thing. It's part of the whole kind of package here, where, extreme competition, winner take all, blah, blah, blah. Many Americans actually make 1% income at least 1 year. They had a lucky year. It happens, right? And some manage to actually parlay that, move up, blah, blah, blah. So the point is, there are many people who, immigrants included, who come in and are on the green line. They're making 32K a year or whatever. Couple generations up, now they're in the blue line, that kind of thing. Some people in one generation go all the way to the dotted line, right? More so in America than anywhere else. That's one thing I wanted to add to this as part of my kind of maybe solution in talking about the rise in inequality, is to notice that, look, there's nothing that can be done about it, and there's nothing that should be done about it, because actually in America, just as long as you keep the dynamism, okay, and as long as you can have the innovation, which is a different question here, it's about scientific and technological innovation, which will increase the GDP production, blah, 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 that kind of a thing. But anyways, we got Game Changer, we got One Man Went to Mo. Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about wokeness, corporate wokeness versus populism. We're talking about the rise in populism, and the reason why we have this chart here is because there's an economic dimension to it, is there not, right? There's an economic dimension to the fact that we see Brexit and we see MAGA, and then there is this cultural aspect, which is anti-woke, if you will. Some people call it xenophobic, and maybe a little bit all the other ists, racist, sexist, whatever, bigoted. And you have the corporate structure that preaches wokeness while not giving you money. That's the nexus of this chart and the woke aspect there. You are broke, you become populist, you're saying, hey, why did you ship my jobs away? Corporate structure says you're a xenophobe, you need to embrace multiculturalism. Multiculturalism indeed made the corporate structure rich through globalization, which is the taking away of the jobs, for example. Simplistic type deals there. But anyways, I'm going to ask you a quick question, One Man, and then we're going to move on to Game Changer here. Just the first question that we started this off with, do you think that corporate wokeness, in other words, that ability to virtual signal by saying, hey, I feel your pain, I'm going to give you Rainbow Day and Black Day and Red Day, but meanwhile, your wages are flat, as shown by this graph here, right? We're not actually giving you money, you are broke, but we feel your pain. Is it a way to pacify the people, or what are your general thoughts in that regard, regarding the connection here between that kind of corporate wokeness versus the fact that you are not getting more money?
All right. Thank you for having me, Ike, and good day, everyone. So, I'm actually going to pick it up from where Kaizo left it off. So we're talking about globalization, and then we're talking about wokeness as well, and then we're talking about entitlement, and then that lands on that question that you've just opened up with, Ike. So, I mean, so the gentleman that was speaking earlier, he was talking about the two extremes of the American space. So the furthest extremes, the most admirable extreme of the American space is innovation. But the at the bottom of that rung is that laziness that Kaizo spoke about. So traditionally, innovation creates and then goes into industry, which then feeds the bottom rung. But with globalization now, the expertise in manufacturing is not domesticated in any particular society. It's spread all over the world, and the ease of movement of our products and etc. It makes it so that there's a global competition for manufacturing. There's a global competition between that chasm of innovation and then the end user. So that slot now is not exclusively to any space, and that is where wokeness comes in. So with that American narrative of entitlement, of sensitivity, and then all of those rights built around the American person, that need for manufacturing needs to go somewhere else because it's cheaper, and it has no real recourse in terms of how it can impact on corporations. So now, what happens to that chasm? That chasm then has to fit into that narrative that you brought in, Ike. So they now use this language of liberalization, equity, entitlement, balancing of sentimentality in terms of other people. So all of those soft purple sentimentalities that we're now in. So that comes into play as an insulation between people not having jobs, and then of course the continuous payout by the government to keep them away from asking questions. But then what happens next is really where the question is.
Very well put there. And so game changer, how's it going? How's your mic?
My mic is good. Testing. You be the judge.
Excellent. Look at you. You're sharp this morning.
Okay.
Anyways, shout out to you. So we've gone several places, and the place that we were at was regarding what is to be done about this chart. I said nothing is to be done about it in terms of as long as you keep the dynamism, and then there's some technological questions. But surrounding this whole topic is the idea of the cultural aspects of populism versus the elites. Okay, populists say that the elites have failed us by taking us into countless wars and messing up the whole pandemic thing, made bad decisions regarding the lockdown, lied about it, covering up the lies now, cannot be trusted, taking us, doing, and also telling us all this woke stuff while indeed they're not giving us bread. They used to at least give us bread or say they're going to unionize us or whatever. Now they just give us, rainbow cards or something like that, right? And hence the question that we started off with right from the very beginning, and then you can throw in what you wanted to throw or what you want to say based on the fact that I know you've been listening in the chat is, well, do you think it's a way to pacify people? Because not only does it pacify people, it shames people. It pacifies some people in the sense that some people may be satisfied with the rainbow cards, but it shames the other people who may want to even complain about their jobs going away by calling them xenophobes or just not down with the whatever, or you're saying, oh, you just don't like the fact that they're hiring more black people or whatever it may be. But shout out to the super chat, Mr. Game Changer, before you go ahead and respond here. Mr. Saul T. Balls, shout out to you. Salute, doctors, and I see another super chat from the Kenyan Ragamuffin out here. Thank you very much. Now, well, go ahead, Game Changer.
Yeah, so I don't think that wokeness is really a form of pacification. More, it's a marketing tool to kind of get people into a certain market group and then market to that group. From what I noticed, and this is purely anecdotal, that the wokies, whatever you want to call it, they tend to actually be in the 75 to 150K range. So they're not necessarily on the 32K, working at Walmart type. I don't know many Walmart workers that are woke. Typically those are the more MAGA types, if they're white, of course. So the wokies, it seems like society is using them as a spending class. What American society has a tendency to do is to get people to identify as something new, other than what they were or other than what they are. And I'll give an example. So you take the Latin Americans or Mexicans in here in America. We all know, it's pretty common knowledge that their beer of choice is Corona. So if you want to market something new to them, you want to market a different beer, that's not going to happen, because if you identify yourself with that particular culture, then part of being in that culture is to drink this beer. And if you drink, of course. And every culture has certain things, and these things are pretty much set as a part of their culture. And there's no way to break in. There's no way for new products, new companies, new advertisers or something to say, hey, Latino community, or hey, Mexican community, here's a new beer, let's try this. Or hey, white community, here, stop drinking Bud or Coors and start drinking this. It's very difficult to bring them away from a cultural staple that they are in generations into. However, what they can do is give them a stronger identity to something else. And then, and since this is a new thing, woke is a new thing, they could say, okay, you are not like your parents. You are not like, whatever you were before, whatever culture you're identified with before. You are now this new woke culture. And this new woke culture drinks this. They drink mimosas, or they drink whatever, and they dress like this, and they buy this, essentially, they buy Teslas. So I think that more than anything, it's more of a consumer class thing, not a labor class thing, that they are instilling into the new generation. I think that's the purpose of this
You
whole.
know what? That is a good dimension.
Mhm.
And actually, I don't. It actually still is in line with the whole idea, because yes, the people at the bottom are the people who become bottom, become more of a populist or MAGA or Brexit sentiment. Yes, it's the
Mhm.
bottom, right? And it is their wages that are not going up. And the worst that is, I mean, the people whom are really at the top, like the 400K or whatever that chart shows, right? They're really, really good, and they can afford to be woke or not woke. They're actually the puppet masters, probably pulling strings of the middle. Anyways, not to oversimplify, but I like the dimension that you put. Yes, the Vogue magazine, creating lifestyles, and this is and we all kind of belong to these, groups. Some sociologists like to call it status groups, and this is the particular. If let's say your group is bikers, right? This is the kind of
Right.
watches the bikers buy, and the radio that they use, and the boots that they wear, and the cologne that they use, right? It's got it's got leather. It comes in a leather box, right? That's my biker cologne, and it's all part of that whole. It's so interesting, but I interrupted you. Land your plane, but good point so far.
Yeah, no. So, and you brought up the bikers. That's a good thing. I mean, you're not going to. That is already an existing market group, and it has been for. I think they were founded over 100 years ago, or nearly 100 years ago. Hell's Angels is what I'm thinking of in particular, because they're local. But so yeah, these are established organizations. So there's no new market groups. Unfortunately, we pretty much here in the States have marketed to each and every single group. Now we're trying to create new ones, and now we are trying, and they've already created it. The LGBT community, that's already have been created. I mean, of course, America didn't invent people who meet one of those particular letters. However, they popularize in it, and they're popularizing it so it can be a larger group, so they can sell new products too, in my opinion. Now, what you were describing, and what you were pinning on the woke culture, I think that's really on the opposite end. I think that culture is really meant to is really a form of poverty and control. I think that they speak to someone's frustrations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because let's be clear, a well-to-do person really a lot of what's going on in the populist group is really anger at competition. they're against globalization, and there's reasons for that, but there's not the reason that you gentlemen are describing. The reason that they're upset about globalization is because it's competition, it's ethnic competition, or whatever you want to call it. It's taking them out of the job market, for obvious reasons. So, and they probably have a good point. Now, what went on 100 years ago when unionizations first started, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and it was a very, very, very contentious thing back then, was they like, okay, their power is their unity. You can get, if you if you could get like 100, you have a company of 250 people, and you get 100 black guys and 100 white guys at the same time to go on strike, then the management, they have to listen. But if you can convince them that, hey, it's not them, it's these black people, they're taking your job, they're working for less, and then your anger is against them. It's really like a divide and conquer method of control that I noticed with that particular group historically. I'm not saying that they don't have a reason to be mad, but it does seem as if their anger is misdirected. Yeah.
Thank you for your submission, as I've heard recently said. Shout out to the super chat. £5. That's more than $5. That's as much as I know about it, but it's very much appreciated. Says thanks for having me on. Anytime. Thank you for your contribution. Yeah, so good point there. Kaizo, I want you to maybe react to the whole market aspect of what Mr. Game Changer added, that, hey, it's a nice little marketing group, and it makes sense for certain corporations, especially, Procter & Gamble or Johnson & Johnson, whoever, to continue to propagate the, kind of make declarations towards the solidification of that market group, right? Or the creation of the market group, because they're going to sell to them. But this also kind of goes into the whole, well, how about the creation of alternatives? Because some people, if we were to take a particular case in point, which is Disney, for example, if you consider Disney going too woke for your kids, obviously the solution is, okay, you block out what you need to block out within your household. Also all kinds of crap out there in the world, right? If Disney has become one of them, well, so be it. Block out McDonald's and sodas and all the other bad things as well. You block out big pharma if you don't want your kids to be on ADHD. You block out whatever educational crap you don't like, and all those other kinds of stuff, right? But there might be room for alternatives. Maybe you can start making you can go against Disney and create your Christian cartoons or Islamic cartoons, which probably but anyways, Kaizo, anything to add with regards to what Game Changer said about the marketing groups? And then towards this idea of solutions, creation of alternatives, is there political recourse, for example, like the people whom are in MAGA country? Can Trump, or maybe it's if it's Vivek, if Trump doesn't make it, or the whole Brexit thing, is there a political recourse here? Anyways, there was a bunch of stuff there. Go ahead, Kaizo.
Okay. Yeah. So banning, blocking these things. Okay. First of all, I think if you just ban or block stuff, well, what's your reasoning behind it? Is it because you think your kids are going to be corrupt, or is it because you think the fundamental programming in your kids will be in a way that you don't want it, right? And in terms of Disney, I don't think Disney is different. Most of us, right, are millennials or whatever the other one after it is, right? And what that means is we grew up with a certain narrative on Disney and the likes of it. But if you look at what they're doing now versus what they were doing then, they're doing the same stuff, just in the context of how society had evolved at that time. I'll give you a very specific example here. Right now, a lot of us are in the manosphere, right? A lot of people have understood about female nature and all of that stuff. Now, one of the issues with female nature, if you take on that sort of fundamental primal aspect that is from them, and you juxtapose it with what Disney was teaching young girls of, well, I'll find a prince, right? Everything will be perfectly ever after. I won't have to do X, Y, Z. If you notice, none of those princesses, I know they're princesses, right? None of them were housewives, right? That's just a simple example. I'm just saying that even the stuff that Disney was projecting at that time when we were kids isn't any better than what they're doing now. They're just doing the same thing, that they've always done, given the context of the times that they were in, and even before us, right?
My
Had the groups. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. A point of contention. I just have to say it is vastly different because, yes, those women were never housewives. Snow White and, Cinderella, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They were never housewives, but they were wives. Modern Disney characters are not wives. There are super ninjas that are capable of doing everything independently. And, they don't need a man or a prince or a husband, and they proudly proclaim so. So it's vastly different. And they're fat.
Okay. Shout out to the fat part. Okay, so I'll keep going, right?
All right.
Now, if we look, sorry about my voice. It sounds crazy. Now, if we look at and analyze the whole markets, the economy, and how that can actually be either worked against us or for us, I'll say this, right? Whenever there's a market problem right now, let's say shows and TV shows that a lot of people are so-called. In fact, you guys are the new woke people, right? Manosphere. You guys are the woke people, right? Because you're saying you're waking up from the matrix. So the new woke people, the Manosphere and the likes, the Christians and the Muslims, you guys should come together and actually create corporations that create content that your kids will actually take. Because right now, obviously, you can't control big tech. You can't control Disney. Disney is going to make money regardless what we like, because hey, it is what it is, right? They'll got a massive distribution network. So I say this is a chance for you
beyond
guys.
the distribution network, is it not just that somehow they're able to always, in other words, these corporations capture the minds of the youth before the parents even know what's going on? And by that I mean the typical average parent, right? And the people who,
So if you look at, let's say right now in the UK, there's the Muslims were not rioting, but they were demonstrating against teaching their kids about let's get busy together, dads and families at the age of 5. So Disney's only just seeing the changes in legislation, changes in policies in these countries that they're projecting these shows to. Disney's not going to make these shows for people in Africa because it's actually banned in Kenya or Uganda to show that stuff to kids, right? So I think what they're doing is they're actually using foresight, looking at the legislations. These kids are going to be interested to see that. They learned it in school about let's get busy together, dad. Now they're watching a superhero, right? Or some young, whatever it is, do the same stuff. So I think Disney, marketing wise, I think that the company is going to survive. The issue really is anyone who has anything against, ultra wokeism should create their own economy or just make their kids not watch it until they think they can take it.
That's why we're here.
Right. Yeah.
go ahead, Eliar. Go ahead.
I agree with what Kaizo's saying to a degree because it's like programming is at a crossroads. It was easier to program society when you only had 5 channels. So you see the remnants of that now. You see, Disney was able to program a few generations. You get what I'm saying? That's why they became so big, because they were programming children who became adults, who became parents, and now who have become grandparents. Thus, we're in a society where people are parents and grandparents, and they're still fantastical into Disney and now Marvel. But the problem becomes when you have so many channels, now you don't have your thumb on the pulse of society because everybody's every different direction. So now you can't program society like you once did because you can't cover for people going in vast different directions. And some of these are the same people. So the downside of this is that's why you're seeing all of this reaching for stuff because they don't know who to program now. And they don't know how to. There isn't necessarily a profile like there once was. We still got base profiles on people, but now it's kind of too far extended. Think about
is wokeism a profile they created?
This one?
Yeah. Do you think that
extension.
society?
It's kind of an extension of what was that? The drag queen era. It's kind of an extension of disco.
Okay, fair enough.
Because it's like replaying stuff over and over again, but at the same time, no matter what it is, in my opinion, what media is doing is propping up the most minority things and trying to make them a majority thing for an issue or even a profit. And at the end of the day, it works because some people are triggered, but they can't figure out a way to trigger everybody and have a antithesis and a hero for everybody now. You know, because just as the rainbow community gets more publicity, they got an enemy, but people are like, same thing like with the chart. The rich are getting quote unquote richer, but at the same time, the rich are incurring bills and going bankrupt faster than I could think now. Because the boom and bust of, I could do this, I could do that, I could do that. You're seeing people, you know, what was that thing we're talking about, like Dave Ramsey and stuff, where you're seeing people like, how did you get all of these bills? How did you make all of these money and incur all of these debts? And what the hell is going on? So society is becoming a hodgepodge of everything, and nobody knows what to do. You can use Hollywood as an example because just as much entertainment or propaganda that they put out, they don't even know what fits anymore. They can't tell you what a blockbuster is and it's going to be. When you look in America as far as sports, now it's so much parity, you don't know who's going to win this year, the next year. You don't have an idea because everything just goes left every year. There's no predictability.
Yeah,
so now
true.
people just jumping on every trend. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I definitely agree with you. I think that these trains are created. I mean, I think that so many corporations are creating so many different cultures and subcultures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're trying real hard. They're trying to pull out consumer bases out of, what would have become just like a regular society where people identified as whatever they are, whatever they're born as. I mean, it's so many people pulling them in so many different directions. And also, I think that in their attempts to do so, the reason why a lot of movies and things like that are flopping is because they all have this mandate. So the cable television station channel Stars, they have what's called a premium woman mandate, where each of their shows is required to have a strong-willed woman, let's just say that, a strong female lead in it. And you see it played out in many of their shows. All of the Power series has this, it's a requirement. I mean, and because they know that that this particular type of person pays, it's a marketing ploy to me, and it's really confusing society.
I
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's kind of what I mean. Like society, when we were kids, everything had a mascot. See, McDonald's had a mascot. Even Walmart with the little rollback thing had a mascot. Christianity, the way they had Jesus everywhere, had a mascot. Now, everybody had to compete because they had something that programmed you. Now, they don't even know what to do anymore. Like, nobody thinks about Ronald McDonald. Nobody thinks about Burger King. You get what I'm saying? Like, nobody thinks about even as we talk about Disney, Mickey Mouse is not a thing really like that.
True.
Like, so not like when you go to if you go to church, there's no pictures of Jesus up there, just stuff out there. There's no symbolism. There's less and less symbolism in society. So there's nothing to say this is us.
Exactly,
So
and they're trying to fill that void.
Yeah, but even they don't even have a mascot. That's the interesting thing. People are trying to fill voids without a mascot and wondering why it can only go for so long.
Good point.
Interesting. Just one little sidebar here with regards to the strong female lead aspect of what you mentioned. I always remember movies like Alien, in the sense that, or you could even go all the way back to the Bible or something like that, right? You didn't have to tell people, that to put strong female leads or whatever. You go back to Greek mythology and the Furies in Hades or Medusa, whatever, all kinds of shall we say, strong female leads in there.
True.
It's kind of funny. Now um w- it's interesting, right? This what I'm trying to say is it adds to your point about the marketing because the emphasis on it, right? It's not like, okay, this is what we're selling, so we got to make sure it's there, as opposed to it just naturally coming out because no one thought, oh, let's make, the alien chick who was probably the most badass female lead back then. No one was, you didn't have to, it was not like a thing, right? It wasn't being sold, right? So there is an aspect of it which I'm being rather obtuse by, kind of mirroring back and forth here with this minute point that you made. But there is an aspect of it that, it's not really even a problem because Alien, the lady was there before, but now we're making it, we're now emphasizing, oh, make sure the lady is there, make sure the lady is there, as though it was as though ladies were blocked. But if you really just saw it as a marketing thing, it's like, and then realize the ladies were always there, then it's like a freeing from the matrix almost, where it's like you don't either have to argue for or against this BS, right? Anyways,
The interesting thing about the ladies is all they're doing differently now. They're doing things. They're making the ladies just as fantastical as they made the men in the 80s and 90s.
yeah, but it's also bad and worse written. It's also not as well written as the Alien, for example.
Well,
Anyways,
I mean, it's
and that's what we're getting at, Ike. I mean, they're replacing written characters, or excuse me, they're replacing good writing with wokeism. They're replacing it, and I get it. Diversity in films like that has always been there. Alien, but now what they've done is something entirely different. I mean, take Lando Calrissian for an example, right? He, for those of you who watch Star Wars, he was, not the main character, but he was a very loved character in the series. And white people didn't complain. There was no real complaints or concerns about it because it's still a great movie. And, and nobody was really against that level of it. But what they are doing now is they're like, okay, let's just completely make crappy movies, but we're going to put a black guy as the lead as opposed to a supporting lead, and and a woman as the superhero Jedi that can beat Luke Skywalker after 6 weeks of training. We're going to
issue.
Yeah, that is when it becomes the issue, because now they're venturing in absurdity. And because see, there was nothing deliberate about Sigourney Weaver's character in Aliens. There wasn't okay, we are going to deliberately write in the script her succeeding in an area that a man failed. I mean, but what they're doing now, and I'm using Star Wars as an example, but you could do the same thing with X-Men, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or Marvel. Excuse me. What they're doing now is, okay, we have this new collection of non-white male leads. Now what we have to do is we have to show them in a dominant position of the previous regime, and that is the white male lead. So if we have a Jedi who everybody has loved for the past 40 years of their life, we're now going to bring out a diverse, woker Jedi and have her or him or it beat the previous Jedi, and it's done all the way down. Like it's done deliberately, I mean, which really is just taken away from the quality of the movie, because they are putting these ridiculous mandates in there. And in addition to that, they're destroying people's beloved characters. They did it with Obi-Wan. They did it with Han. They did it with Luke. I mean, it's like, these are people like myself who've been fans of the franchise for decades are like, wait a minute, you're destroying all of my favorite characters who it took decades for me to make as my favorite, to develop, and then you are replacing them with newly developed people who you feel that their only dimmable quality is that they're a minority type. That is extremely bad writing. Right now, they have this new show, Ahsoka. It's like, oh yes, there's a new female Jedi, and she reports to a new female general, and her new Padawan is female, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is starting to get weird. It's so yeah.
And the enemy's female Jedi, and the enemy's leader is also female. All of them are females.
Exactly. I mean, now it's just starting to get weird. So yeah, I get what you're saying. When it comes to aliens, or you could say Tomb Raider or something like that. I mean, but Leia was a strong woman as well. I mean, that has already always existed, but now it's turbocharged to where it's completely taken away from the reality of a movie or a
I
series
think
or whatever.
people aren't just, the writing isn't, the writing has been bad for about 30 years. People got to take into consideration the writing, like something well written is a rarity at this particular point. Like, think about it. We're talking about the best movies that you can make are based off of a comic books that are 30 years old.
True.
Or storylines that are 40 and 50 years old. There had, or, I mess with my lady and I clown about this all the time. I was like, if you watch a show, it doesn't matter which show you watch, it's going to be the same exact sex scene. 13 seconds, push somebody against the wall on a bed. It's the same thing over and over and over and over again. I don't care if it's a show. I don't care if it's a movie. It
reminds me of the tying someone to a chair scene where I don't know if that's ever actually been done in real life, but somehow like 17,000 movies they're tied to a chair. Anyways, go ahead.
It's the same. If you've watched entertainment for at least 15 years, I can tell, oh, they're running in the street. Somebody's about to get hit by a car. It's not going to be the hero, though. Watch, jump, slip, slide, bang. Yep, he's out of there. Car chase. Somebody's going to get hit by a bus or a diesel truck. Same old thing. You get what I'm saying? Love story. Somebody's going to get their heart broken because they overlooked the person 30 minutes ago in the movie.
That's my least favorite part.
Thing. Right. Yeah, it's the same thing over and over again. I think the only difference now is like what Kaiser and what Game Changer is talking about that I've noticed is if a guy was in a movie that was an action movie and he was 180 pounds, he didn't beat up the 300-pound guy with just brute strength. He had to figure something out. Now what you're seeing is people who just, it doesn't make sense. Oh yeah, that little raccoon can beat up the Hulk. That makes a whole lot of sense. He just punched him in the face. It's like, no, y'all, you're going too far now. It doesn't make sense. But that's what we're talking about. That's the, people like Rocky because they thought a white guy could beat up a black guy, but he had to figure out, I got to beat him up in a Rocky way. I can't beat him up his way. You get what I'm saying? It didn't make sense. So now everything doesn't make sense because they don't know how to make sense. Who are you going to make sense to?
Shout out. Well, hold on a second.
Wait, you guys. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna go ahead and acknowledge the super chat, and then want to get Dr. Thunder's take on the most recent aspect of what we were talking about, and then we'll kind of start landing the plane here. Shout out to Saul again for the second super chat, and he says tribute. Okay, tribute to verse 1. Maybe that's what it means. Where it says, "By the powers vested in me, your deacon, steward of the scrolls, bestows 1 sack of Lizzos worth of coinage on behalf of thine brethren pupils, for they demonstrate in the great arts and science of how to rebuketh thine heathenry." Yes, exactly that. Exactly that.
Yeah, and by the way, he has a specific. So what is it? What is it? One Lizzo? Wait, no, I'm sorry. One May is equal to 2 Lizzos.
Yes,
and then 2 Lizzos is equal to, I think it's 4. What is it? I can't think of. He'll probably put it in the chat. It's pretty funny. But yeah, this is a good conversation.
I want you to chime in on the on your solutions aspect. On the solutions aspect, in other words, the economic solutions aspect of this chart, like we were going on about. Hey, if we do care about these people, right? What is to be done? I did add the aspect of that. There's in America is where you can go from line to line, right? You mentioned your dad from time to time, right? How he grew up versus how you grew up. So he hopped and skipped a couple of these lines. And in America is where you can do that the most. Not only economically, by the way, but also kind of socio-politically, in the sense of, Barack Obama can be the president of the United States. It's not the kind of thing that just happens in like France or something like that, right? It's like no, it's not obviously. But anyways, solutions, or what I say is, you don't need to do anything. Just keep the dynamism going, because you can go from line. You can go to the top as long as there's still opportunities. Blah blah blah. What do you say?
Okay, so I think that there's sort of different factions around this issue of, if people that don't have the sort of opportunities, maybe didn't have both their parents, maybe they grew up in the projects, if they're able to achieve at a certain rate or not. And if they do achieve, then that proves necessarily that others from that same group, having the same sort of circumstance, that means they must be dusty ninjas then, since you've located a few outliers. But around that sort of topic, there's emerged sort of factions, right? And one faction says, let's point out the systemic issues, the issues about the system that are creating these sort of disproportionate, disproportionate issues in particular communities. And the other side says, well, that just sounds like whining and complaining. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, stop whining about it, this kind of thing. Now, I actually think that the solution to the problem is somewhere in between them. I think that if we're going to isolate this conversation right now to the Black community, the Black community is hyper individualistic. And the reason that other, like first generation immigrants come in and they run laps around the Black community is because those communities are not hyper individualistic. They bring a collective, a group ethic, not imposed by a government, not imposed by anyone else, but they themselves decide that family is important, community is important, and we're going to take these positive aspects of tribalism and we're going to take advantage of those. So they'll do stuff like, they come here, they got a 1-bedroom apartment, they got 8 people sleeping in there. They'll do that for, several years. And then they start sort of a pipeline, and everybody understands that you prioritize people from your community. It's a lot of quote unquote nepotism. It's a lot of promoting people that are from within the group, right? Now, so in my mind, part of that we could definitely benefit from. The other thing is we need to continue to talk about the aspects of the system that need to be fixed. Because, say, for instance, if you arrive, so Dr. Thunder is a tenured professor, so I don't actually need to be talking about this stuff. And so one approach I could take, I could say, well, I'm doing fine. And so the reason you guys ain't doing fine is because you dusty. And then I can leave it there. I can pull the ladder back up. Or I can decide that let's take a look at some of these issues that still exist, see if there's some ways to actually fix those issues so that people that come up after me have less resistance from, by the system, right? So I think the combination of those couple things, and then plus the individual themselves, you're not going to be able to for your own situation, complain your way out. That doesn't exist. You can address issues for other people, for people generally that are going to be younger than you, that may benefit them, but that's not going to benefit you right now. And so the answer to this is you have to learn how to stop making excuses and fully utilize all the resources that are around you. And one thing that doesn't happen as much as it should, and it's for a couple reasons. One reason is that young people, they've basically been taught that there's some sort of legitimacy in them, keeping it real and doing it their own way and being an individual and all this kind of stuff. So they don't know anything. And then when older people try to talk to them, they act like, they can't be bothered. But then the other side of that is there's been a history of older folks in our community, especially boomers, we'll say, that basically have, they got a good job. They decided that they were going to pull the ladder back up, or they got a good job, and rather than spending time actually trying to help other folks, they go buy themselves a motorcycle, or a sports car, so they can chase anyhow. My point is that there's a history of older folks not saying things in a way that it could be palatable to younger folks, right? So I think that there's multiple aspects, multiple ways to address these issues. And it's not a one size fits all, and it's not a one or the other. It certainly is not because you point out issues in the system and you say that there is racism, that there is issues, systemic racism or whatever, that means that now you're a complainer and whiner. So now, that's a problem, and then it also isn't the thing where you say, well, if somebody says, hey, work harder, work smarter, take advantage of what you have, the resources, that somehow is, unrealistic or quote unquote for the masses. Now we know, and it says in the Bible, that the poor will always be with you. And so you're not going to be able to fix this issue for everyone. And frankly, some people prefer being poor. They prefer being poor based on their actions, based on what it is, that they're not motivated enough to do anything different rather than to be poor, and so you're not going to be able to help everyone. So we're really talking about a very small percentage of people that can actually be helped. But that percentage of people, when you expand it, in the future, can become a significant population. So it's never just about what's happening right now. It's about the way that what happens now is going to actually benefit people in the future. That's what I'm focused on. That's what I'm thinking about. And any of these kind of conversations, including some of the sort of mating and dating conversations that happen in this space, I don't, people that are my age and older, the conversation's not really for us. The conversation really is to benefit the younger people. That's really actually where where that can actually have a benefit, and certainly just sitting around complaining about your own situation is not going to fix your situation for you, right? You got to do something different. You have to take some different actions. Education, of course, is important. Finding some affordable pathways to get yourself moving. There's a lot of things to do. The biggest thing is stop making excuses for yourself and start getting something happening. Make it happen. And whatever that means, if it means you don't get very much sleep for 3-4 years in a row, that's what it means. But whatever you have to do to make that happen. But just don't forget about other folks when you get there.
Indeed. So what we're gonna do now, game changer to LAR, and then we'll wrap up with Dr. Thunder. We're gonna give our closing thoughts here. We're gonna bring this one to a close, ladies and gentlemen. We had a great conversation, okay, and an actual, tractable one where we looked at the nexus of populism and woke capitalism. We looked at this chart. We looked at the economic realities that underlie a lot of populism, and we talked about, hey, what are you going to do about it? Now, with regards to from the individual perspective, from the individual approach, the things that can be done in order to increase dynamism, if you will. In other words, the chances of people from the bottom going up, removing impediments from their way, and a big part of that has to do with removing certain regulation. Okay, now it is notorious. People talk about the whole, well, I want to braid hair and I need 17 licenses and all kinds of weird little agencies up my butt. That is one thing that we can definitely do. And then on the bigger picture in terms of deregulation, the whole area of energy and transportation has been over-regulated for decades now. The reason why we see a lot of technological innovation in the space of bits, in the space of ones and zeros, in the space of game changer, is because it's relatively deregulated, kind of for obvious, kind of natural reasons, right? So things spring up over there, but meanwhile, want to build some kind of thing. Who knows? Maybe it's a nuclear power plant, whatever it is, right? That could give people these jobs. It's like, oh no, it's bad, it's not good, it's anti, it's some kind of. Anyways, so we've went through that whole swath of ideas, ladies and gentlemen, with Game Changer adding the fact that in addition to the fact that there's economic incentive and virtue signaling incentive for corporate to be woke, there's also the market creating aspect. They're creating a market. They're creating a group, a cohort of people that they can then market to. They can then sell stuff to. Like, you believe this, you think this, you are politically correct, and you drink this type of coffee, you wear this type of shoes and whatnot. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, landing the plane, Game Changer, what are your general thoughts in closing here? What would you want to give us?
So I'll close with what I came up to open with, and that was a general response to what LAR was saying about how the people on top are stupid, and they don't really, because they're behaving in ways that limits the corporation, or stifles the corporation's future, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't. Well, I mean, I'm not going to call them bright, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they're stupid. I will say that they have misplaced loyalties. Their loyalty isn't to the company. If they could make, a large amount of money in the destruction of their own company, or their father's company, or their grandfather's company, then that's what they're going to do. If they even if they see that their company is going to, go under, then they'll just short it and, make as much money, with it going under as well. There's no loyalty. I mean, when you think about how aristocracy works, and I think, Ike, you say you're a part of that. So when you think about how that works, you're pretty much all in, because your future, your family's future, et cetera, is tied to the strength of the nation that you are a part of, that, gives you your titles and gives you, makes you who you are, gives you your place in the nobility, or the or royalty, or whatever you're in. So you're tied to that, as it has been in the past. But in a republic, you're not really tied to that.
Even beyond the republic, in a global dispensation now, you're just completely, you're like a number, right? In terms of, you're this global elite controller of capital number that doesn't even matter where you're located, right? You're just
right. Exactly. So, it makes sense that we have a generation, or, we probably have for several generations, a new thinking amongst the elites. And that is, hey, if I do something and the country that I was born in goes to trash, I'll move to another country. It's why you're not tied to anything.
The Rust Belt. Yeah. I'm sorry, I keep on interjecting here, but the Rust Belt is testament to that. The Rust Belt in the United States, where you have companies in the United States getting themselves rich by, presumably screwing, and I know I'm simplifying, a particular region, right? So capital will move to where it has leverage. It's like a law of nature. And if it has more leverage over in Asia, that's where it'll move to and screw the Rust Belt.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, no, you make a point. Like, I mean, if if you're in the Midwest or something like that, and you have this manufacturing base, and you know that the people who manufacture the goods are also the people that consume the goods, so it is in your long-term best interest to see that they have the money to consume your goods, but you don't really care about the long term. You just want to make a cheaper product now and make your money now, because who cares if this place goes to rest. So no, absolutely. Well put. So yeah, that was something I came up to address what LAR said, and it was something I wanted to respond to what you were saying, Ike, but I don't remember exactly what it was. Where you were talking about people moving out of their socioeconomic class. Could you refresh my memory on what in particular you said about that?
Well, generally, I was saying that compared to other countries, America has the most dynamism in terms of these lines that we're looking at here. That even if we look at ourselves anecdotally, right, or in our parents or whatever, that people have moved from the green line to the blue line. A lot of people have done that, right? And that in other countries, it tends to be the case that the same families are in all these same lines, right? But in America, it's more the case that people go to the top and then fall to the bottom all the time. And that dynamism is not reflected in this chart. And I think that dynamism is what needs to be sustained. And there's nothing that's wrong with this chart. There is no need to suppress the dotted line down. Just keep the dynamism, and people can traverse the chart. Those are the things that I said. I don't know if it.
You did jog my memory on what I was. It wasn't directly related to that, but no, I do remember, because you were talking about how there were steps and there were conditions in play and there were measures that that society is making and that the existing oligarchy is making in order to assure that people don't go from green to black. And that is because, of course, naturally, they want to reserve the black for those most like themselves through family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and upbringing. And yes, I have seen that play out. I think one instance of that is, the Asian or the Oriental, more specific community, and the Africans as well. However, they tend to, in this country, fall into a category with African Americans on paper, at least. So it's kind of hard to track their success. However, in getting into the Ivy League, they are red taping those particular groups of people. They are, creating more legacy, things like that, to assure that the people of the existing order maintain that. So I don't know if it's natural, and I don't know if it's justified or anything like that, but there is a push. There is a push against meritocracy, complete meritocracy, because without it, a lot of people will lose their sustained advantage of generational wealth. So there is a thing. I know Dr. Thunder touched on that, but there is a thing. It's not necessarily racism. It's just really in, how do I classify? I mean, it's not necessarily racism. It's more akin to cronyism and nepotism, but it is a thing. There is a push to make sure that certain people remain in certain positions.
100%. Yes, and as we move on to LAR and then Dr. Thunder here, there's this kind of two-door system of whereby it's like money laundering, but you're laundering meritocracy. So here's what I mean, game changer. So you have a law firm, okay? Now you could hire somebody from Cal State San Diego, lawyers that is, to do the work in your law firm, okay? But you don't want people of that class, okay? So you say you only hire top from Yale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because meritocracy, right? But your family is also kind of, you guys have alumni status in Yale, and you guys can always funnel your people and your kinds of people through Yale to get it's like money laundering. You get washed up through meritocracy, then you end up at the law firm, and it's like, hey, it's meritocracy. These are the best of the best. It's like, dude, you guys are not doing anything special there in that accounting firm, okay? Shout out to Deloitte or whatever. You guys are just using this system of meritocracy to keep a certain class of people here because a Cal State San Diego lawyer or accountant can do the work. Okay, trust me, right? They're not doing genius stuff over there. So I just wanted to add a point to that
No. Well,
yeah.
and also I just want to one small correction. That's pseudo meritocracy, because if they didn't deserve to get into Yale and they only got there through nepotism or what have you, or legacy, then that's not, they don't have the merit. So it's pseudo meritocracy at that.
Yeah, and it also, even if they got in there, I also still have a problem with the even if you're like, okay, he was a really smart one and he got in there by himself. It's the fact that you don't need this crap, right? It's like you don't need to go through this crazy, because there's also like now I'm talking about a broader effect on the society that has crazy tournaments that are unnecessary. It's like where you're going to put your child through all this crazy stuff that doesn't really matter at the end of the day, just to make sure that they ended up somewhere in the front, so they don't get swallowed up by you may see the kind of general thing. So it's like a separate issue.
Yeah, well said.
Mr. LAR, sir, what are your final thoughts on this here fruitful conversation? And shout out to the super chat, by the way. I'm sorry. Shout out to the super chat. Don McKee says, "Good stuff. Thank you very much. $5. Thank you very much." Go ahead, LAR.
That just, what do you call it? My conspiracy theorist hat will be on when I say this. American politicians and the upper class have had a war on the American dream for decades. And how do you get out of that war if you are coming from the bottom or the middle? Because using, inflation and, education and health and just your daily routine to get by, the math of it doesn't necessarily hint to you or heed to you coming out of that on top in the end. So what are you supposed to do? Now, what I see is, inflation is really at war with profit, and you're going to pass that on to the consumer, and the consumer can't afford it, and now the business is going to go under, and the consumer is going to, do what? Save a little money? No, because the landlord is going to raise the rent. So what are we going to do as an American society? Nobody really knows, because it's unaffordable to live, quote unquote, the American dream for, I would say, the middle class and the lower class. And the problem is America keeps producing things for the upper class, and they overproduced it because now it's too much out there. Like when I was talking about mascots earlier, the biggest mascots right now will probably be luxury labels. That would be your biggest mascot. That's what people are fighting and attaining to. Gucci and whatever and whatever. Well, what happens when you can't afford to buy it? You can't afford to look at it. You go to the grocery store and what? You can't afford regular food. And ironically, your ass don't know how to cook. So now it's going to cost you more. You got people working, Ubers, going, you got a society of people Ubering everywhere, and a society of people to Uber Eats, and you're eating out, and you're dying slow because you're eating fast food, and it's expensive, and it's adding up, but you got to work, and you got to live. So what are we going to do? And when Dr. Thunder said the family dynamic is great, but seems to me now, those first generations, when they get to second and third generation, they become individualistic. And that's what the country's banking on. So a lot of times, what you got to do is learn to live in poverty, even if you're not in poverty. Because that's the only way you're going to get ahead. That's it. The only way you're going to get ahead is the old school live beneath your means. And the problem is they're trying to make the bottom so expensive that you can't even do that. So that's my point.
Well said.
The only way to get ahead is to live below your means, and get a passport is the only way to get ahead, says Dr. Thunder. Isn't that right? But anyways, Dr. Thunder, what are you up to this week here? Again, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of Case Closed, right? 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday. And we talked about the woke Disney and the broke American and the nexus between them, populism and all that good stuff. Some recommendations given, a very deep analysis as to the political connections between all these things, and everything from the marketing and the pacification of the people. But anyways, Dr. Thunder, you get to land the plane today. Well, as usual.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, everybody can hear me.
Yep.
Okay, great. Because my situation is a little different. So now I'm driving. So anyhow, yeah, one of the with the woke thing, it's underlying something that I said prior. But the woke thing was really caused primarily by neoliberal white women. Okay, that's primarily what did this sort of woke epidemic that we're in. Because rather than a simple solution to a problem, simple does not mean easy. Simple just means not complex. The simple solution to the problem, that this country created for Black people would have been to just simply extend basic respect to Black men in particular. That would have been the way to fix this issue. And the way that you respect them is by giving them access, right? So because they refused to do that, they went around the horn as far away from actually doing that as possible. And that's what all this intersectional stuff is. And Black folks get criticized for supposedly using the race card when that's the only card that's in the deck. And to act as though that's not an issue, that racism is not an issue, I think is problematic. But with respect to yourself, what you are able to do, it's my estimation that Black folks in general, Black men in particular, likely could work harder, work smarter, make less excuses, become more educated, and utilize the already available resources that are around them. Now, even if we do that, though, the reality is that we're still going to achieve at a lesser rate than members from the dominant society, because the dominant society designed the society in a way that would prop them up and would benefit them. It's okay to acknowledge that this is true, and also to acknowledge that we could do better. Those things are not at odds with each other. They're not at odds with each other. Yeah. So I guess the last thing I'll say is to young folks that are trying to not repeat some of the mistakes that older folks have made. The best way to do that actually is by actually listening to people that have more experience than you do. even if you're listening to them, just for the sake of saying, well, I don't want to do that. Because a lot of my teachers, I had really good teachers, but I also had teachers that I saw the way that the information that they were presenting, I had some issues with it, and I saw how it seemed to have lots of gaps. And so that led me to do some better research myself. So even if they're not right, at least it gives you a place to start. So you don't have to totally recreate the wheel. Black folks are entirely too individualistic, hyper individualistic. And you can look at members of the dominant society that are able to make it that way. It's just not going to work for Black folks that way. I think that's what has hurt our community the most. In particular, by exiling the ones that would be the best leaders and prioritizing dysfunction over lining up behind and supporting our sort of best and brightest. So that's my take.
Thank you very much for your take there, sir. And I hope you have a safe drive back to your destination, wherever that might be. Shout out to the last two super chatters out here. Gayogami hitting us with Canadian dollars. Says good discussion and panelists as usual. Thank you very much for that. And a real sponsorship category up there with Salty Balls. Blessing us with a $20 super sticker of sorts. Well, anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of Case Closed, where we have the highest level conversations on the most relevant topics. And today, we showed that populism is indeed on the rise, as we all know. We see Brexit, we see MAGA, and all those other kinds of things. We know that the corporate elitists are woke in their nature, in their disposition. They preach to you their understanding of your pain, their openness to your social situation, but really they've been keeping you broke. They've been taking the jobs away. They've been prioritizing automation and certain other types of things, perhaps things that are akin to the hyper individualism that was mentioned by Dr. Thunder. And we traversed that whole conversation while you guys were generously dropping the super chats and all that kind of good stuff. So shout out to the panelists and shout out to the listeners and shout out to the people who participated in the chat and the super chatters one more time. Peace. We are gone.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what was behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising and hearts are compromised. rising. Conditions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.